T-minus 1 minute. T-minus 30 seconds. We are go for launch. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome once again to Kennedy Space Center's Safety and Health Days. I am Dustin Kamak, and along with Kim Goodrich, we will be your co-host for today's event. Kim, would you like to come online and say hi to everyone?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.
Excellent. Thank you, Kim. So first off, I'd like to welcome you all, obviously, to today's program with Alex Sheen. But before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping items that I would like to discuss. Give me one moment as I pull up my slides here. One moment here. I have some audio playing that I don't want to play. Okay, there we go. And let me full screen this for everybody. Okay, so today, obviously, we are streaming this program on YouTube Live. For those who need closed captioning is available on this screen. You can find that little button in the lower right-hand corner of this video player. I will say this, that YouTube's closed captioning is not behaving properly over the past several days, so we are pushing our closed captioning feed from our Microsoft Teams window here. We also have the ability to, here we go, here's that screen. Lower right-hand corner, there's a closed captioning. We also have a chat feature that we'll be using in YouTube. It's located on the right-hand side. If that feature is not available for some reason, you can always send us an email at ksc-ilovesafety@mail.nasa.gov. Again, send us your questions at ksc-ilovesafety@mail.nasa.gov. So I'm going to close out of this screen here real quick, and I'm going to start to introduce our speaker. Okay, so our speaker for today has been sharing the importance of a promise with people around the world. Alex Sheen is the founder of Because I Said I Would, a social movement and nonprofit dedicated to the betterment of humanity through promises made and kept. He is someone who truly honors commitment. Alex once walked over 240 miles across the entire state of Ohio in 10 days to fulfill a promise. Alex has impacted millions of people with the Because I Said I Would message through the virtual nature of social media. His work has been featured on ABC World News with Diane Sawyer, CNN, the Los Angeles Times, and the Today Show, and many other programs. Please help me welcome Alex Sheen.
Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm glad to be with you here actually in Cleveland, Ohio, about 7.3 miles away from NASA Glenn Research Center, coming to you with this fresh new haircut that I gave myself because my girlfriend's attempt failed miserably. But Don't tell her that, right? Like she's not watching this. It's like a between me and you kind of thing. You know what I mean, right? So I'm glad to be here with you, and I'm going to see you in the live chat. I got a second computer over here, so if you see me looking that way, I'm looking at you as we head into just deeper and deeper into 2021, a time where we're obviously thinking about the future and what it holds for us. NASA is so much about what the future is, but I don't think the average person, walking down the street anywhere in the United States or in the world, I don't think the average person is thinking about the future in the way that I'm about to describe. Because if you take, let's say, every single species, every single organism on this entire planet, human beings are the only ones that are capable of even acknowledging, knowing that there is a future, at least to the capacity that we can, right? I think we are so capable, we're so inundated with what the future is that we forget that we're one of the only beings that even knows that the future exists in this way. Right? And if you were to take a human being, you put them into an MRI machine, you ask them questions, survey them questions about the future, forcing them to think with that capacity, the frontal lobe of their brain actually lights up. Now, we're not exactly sure what happens in there, but apparently that's what's giving us the capacity to think about the future. And that capacity, oh, what a burden. Oh, what a burden. To think about the future. Because think about it, even when we were little kids, we started worrying about the future, right? Like, I got to do good school, middle school, high school. I got to play on this team or get a scholarship maybe, or go to college, get a job right after. Apparently, a house takes 30 years to pay off, and I got to attract a spouse and then pay off all these things and then save for retirement. And it's a life of worry with this capability. But then somewhere along the way, in your life and mine, someone has come along and said, hey, listen, I can tell you what the future will be. For at least this one thing, I promise you, this will happen. It almost calms us biologically. Takes away our worry and our anxiety. And so when I think about this concept of a promise in my life, I think of one person, happens to be a healthcare worker, my dad, pictured here. My father was a pharmacist, a scientist in his own way, in a hospital for 25 years. But growing up, I thought of my father as an average guy, right? My father didn't write books. He didn't run marathons. My father was no war hero, In fact, if you would have known him in some other life, you would have never gone home and talked about Sheen, He was far too average for you to do that. Unnoticeable, except for that one thing. My father was a man of his word. When he said he was going to be there for you, he showed up. Far from a perfect person, but he kept his promises. And that's a question I want to ask you right now in the live chat. Who is the most reliable person in your life? Who is that person that maybe on that emergency contact form, every single time you write the same name? That person who will put their head through a wall to make sure that you're okay? Write that in the live chat. Also, I want to know, why am I calling it a live chat? All chats are like innately they are live. That's what the word means. But anyways, that's not the point. I'll see you guys here typing in a second. And my answer to that question was my dad. So one day, my father, this sort of dweeby pharmacist guy, he's sitting at home. It's 2011, and he hears his phone ring. So he goes, he grabs it, he turns it over, and it's the hospital calling. Well, of course, this is where he works, right? So he's got to answer. He swipes, he answers, and on the other line is a doctor, a friend of his that he works with at the hospital. And in this phone conversation, my father is informed that he has been diagnosed with stage 4 small cell lung cancer. Now, my father was a go-down swinging kind of man. He came to this country as an immigrant, And I say that only because sometimes it's not so easy making it on your own. You have to develop some pretty tough skin to get by. And so with this attitude throughout his life, at this point of his diagnosis, my father elected for the most aggressive treatment for radiation and chemotherapy. Now, a lot of people have heard of chemotherapy before, obviously, right? But not many people know what it actually is. You see, chemotherapy, it is quite literally a poison. Developed prior to World War II, it is based on a primitive concept. You see, cancer, it is so difficult to defeat that the thought was just to poison the body so deeply that the cancer simply could not live in its conditions. Now, as extreme as that may sound, listen, sometimes life does not give us choices. Sometimes this is the only way the patient will get any sort of chance. But remember something for a second. You know, my father was a pharmacist in a hospital for 25 years. He knew more about the treatments he was taking than a lot of people ever will. And with that comes a distinct knowledge, a scientific understanding of the odds that are against you. In the case of my dad, those odds were terrible. But sometimes we got to go down swinging, right? And so my father, he took this treatment, and it actually started to work. You know, this cancer that grew so close to my father's heart that it was surgically inoperable, couldn't be cut out. Through this treatment, though, it began to shrink, so small that you couldn't see it in any of these medical scans. They kept doing it on my dad over and over and over again. And even him, the most genuine of skeptics, I assure you, he deemed it some sort of miracle, that perhaps he was saved. Now, I know a lot of people right now are thinking about that thought of a medical diagnosis, right? A test result coming back, hoping that it's negative, right? And so you can imagine back in 2011, 2012, you know, how much this meant to me and my family. It was a positive turnaround for my father's health. I feel like we had to celebrate, right? You know, I mean, I don't know. I went to college. I know how to celebrate, right? So I go to my old man and I say, listen, old man, dad, anything you want, anywhere you want to go, money is no object. We got to celebrate this moment. Okay, let's hear it. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? Right? What does he say? He says, I want Chinese food. Same damn Chinese restaurant every single time. It didn't matter what the occasion was, you know. He was super boring like that. You know how dads are. They got their routine. They like what they like. So whatever. We'll go to this Chinese place that we've been to 40,000 times. And it was a good meal, you know. A good day. The kind of day that I think a lot about. And the kind of day that I will never have another one of. Because as you've probably already noticed, I speak of my father in the past tense. The cancer would spread from my father's lungs into his liver, into his pancreas, and into his brain. On September 4th of 2012, it was a bright morning. In the house that I grew up in as a child, as a grown man, I would go to my father's bedside and I'd play some music for him that I thought he might like. I told him that he did the best he could to take care of us, and that my brother and I, we could take it from here. I held his hand, and with the best ability I had as his son, I desperately tried to comfort my father as he died. Now, you and I, we are only strangers, and I do not know if you have ever lost someone that you have loved. I can only say that I have. His name was Sheen. He had 2 sons. I'm one of them. He put a roof over my head. He paid for me to go to college. He never wore a shirt around in the house, which I thought was weird and embarrassing. I was named after him. In the course of all of our losses, we have so many questions. Like, why him and why now? Why does it have to be me and my family? And in this struggle, we are afforded very few answers. In my struggle, I was asked by my family to give my father's eulogy, to speak to his greatest characteristic, his greatest quality as a man. And I kept coming back to this thought, the importance of a promise. You see, too often in this life, people say things like, I'll get to it, or tomorrow. Well, the last thing that my father taught me is that one day there will be no tomorrow. And the promises that we make and we keep, and those we choose to dishonor, that's what defines us in our character. It always has, long before my father was ever born, and long after I go, a single measure of honor that we use so quickly to judge other people, but as quickly we should use this perhaps to judge ourselves. My father's eulogy would be titled, Because I Said I Would. And for the very first time that day, I would hand out one of these. I called it a promise card. On the front, it says, Because I Said I Would. On the back, there's nothing else. It is very simple to use. What you do is you take a promise in your life. Maybe it's something small that you said today. Maybe it's something so deep that it defines part of your purpose for even living on this earth. You write that promise on this card. You go to the person you're making that commitment to. You tell them, I'm going to fulfill this promise, and when I do, I earn this card back. It is a symbol of my honor, my respect. It is my property, and I'm coming back for it. You go, you fulfill your promise, you come back to that person, you earn your card back, and you keep it as a reminder that perhaps you are a person of your word. Maybe someone like Dad was to me. And so his funeral ends, and I go home. The next thing that I would do would set off a chain of events to the scope of which I may never understand. That's where this little internet thing comes in. You see, I'd make a post online, an offer. I said that I would mail, like physically mail. I said that I would mail 10 promise cards to anybody, anywhere in the world, at no cost to anyone, which is the dumbest financial decision I've ever made in my entire life. First lesson today, don't offer free stuff to strangers on the internet, okay? That should go without saying, but I'm kind of dumb, you know? This is a picture of the first 5 sets of cards I ever sent out. 5 requests in a day is no big deal. You know, you wake up early, you go to sleep a little late, few here and there. It's not a hassle. But that's 5 requests in a day. What if you were to receive 50 requests or 500? Or one morning you wake up, that little red notification bubble on your phone, it says 15,000? What do you do then? Well, I would have to figure that out. And that is because since September 4th, 2012, the day that my father left, we have distributed over 9.81 million promise cards to over 153 countries around the world, and by request only. 153 countries. You see, it turns out that for this one thing, it doesn't matter the language you speak, the color of your skin, how much money you make, how old you are, or who you love. We all understand the importance of a promise. It is something core and elemental to human existence. In fact, talk to a historian or an anthropologist. Study human culture. Find an isolated tribe, a group of people who essentially know only of themselves, and still in that isolation, you will see the importance of a promise living every single day. And that brings me to this question for you right now in the extremely live chat. What change are you trying to make in your life right now? Right? You might not call it a promise, you might call it something else. So let's just say, what change are you trying to make in your life to your mental health, your physical health? And I do want to say, Eric, you know, you mentioned that today is your dad's birthday that you lost 2 years ago. I just wanted to express my condolences and say that, you know, a happy birthday to Dad is still something I celebrate as well in my own way. And that makes me think of the changes that I need to make to be more like him in certain ways. So I'm looking forward to see those thoughts, because that's really what would be written on this card. It could be a promise to someone who's close to you, like a dad, right? Or maybe this young girl who writes, I promise to make life worth living for my sister with Down syndrome every day of her life, and to take care of her when my parents are no longer able to. A promise could be in recognition of a simple fact, like this young man in the Czech Republic. I mean, he knows, he is certain that somebody somewhere has got to need that half liter of blood more than he does. And so he commits to helping the sick or the injured In some ways, a promise can be to even safety, right? If you look at, well, if you work in charity for long enough, you start to understand these different lists. You understand the challenges that face humanity, and you'd come to learn in a long enough journey here that the fourth leading cause of death in the United States, if COVID wasn't here, the fourth leading cause of death in the United States is accidents, right? And so I remember this one woman made a promise to a specific type of accident in this weird way. She wrote, "I promise not to text or Facebook while driving," right? She wrote that on a card, but instead of giving that card to anyone or putting it on her bathroom mirror, what she did is she put it in the console of her car. And every time she got in her car, she would take that card out, she would put it on her phone and twist it as a physical lock screen, a reminder that she cared more about the safety of a stranger than a text that most certainly can wait. You see, our commitments would often be about what it takes to control oneself, right? Something that is difficult in different areas in life. And I had a supporter named Jason. Jason would call our office back in 2013 sometimes, instead of just like messaging us, he's like, "Alex, I want to tell you about this firsthand. I'm struggling with something internally, actually, something that I need to call a problem. I need to call it what it is." And so, "Alex, I'm going to write this promise card, and it's going to say, 'Stop drinking. I have to change my life.'"
Excuse me, Alex.
Yes.
I am so sorry to do this, but the gremlins have showed up today. We're getting ready to lose our broadcast feature for about 5 minutes. The laptop has to reboot. So I'm just giving you a heads up. We're going to go ahead and talk for a few more minutes, and then I'll let you know that we're going to stop, and we're going to briefly pause for about 5 minutes, no more than that, to let the computer reboot, and then we'll be back on. So the YouTube stream will continue, so everyone out in the audience, please stay tuned. We are just going to have to take a break here in just a second.
And in that 5 minutes, while we tear this down and rebuild it real quick, chat with me, right? I got a computer right here, so chat with me. I'll see you in a few minutes.
Absolutely. Stay engaged. We'll be right here on the YouTube chat, and we'll be back here in just 5 minutes as this laptop reboots. I apologize for this. We have a little technical difficulty, so stand by. I will. Okay, everybody, welcome back. I do apologize for that brief delay. Again, we had a technical difficulty. We had to reboot one of our laptops. We're in a virtual environment, and sometimes these things happen. So thank you so much for your patience. So now that we're back, I'm going to hand it back over to Alex, and please continue with your amazing story.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I just even mentioned in the chat, and thank you guys all for staying interactive with me on YouTube. But I've had 2 times where a fire alarm has been pulled. I remember one time I literally just went outside with like 1,000 people, stood on a stoop, and just yelled. So this is actually, as weird as it sounds, this is much better. But I was talking about one of our supporters, Jason, who was struggling through this promise to quit drinking. Right? It's something that he realized that he had to do, but he said to me, Alex, listen, I'm going to use your card in a little different way. I hope that's all right. He says, on the back of this card, I'm going to put a tally mark for every day that I go sober. But that's the thing about commitments, right? Easier said than done. So he would trip up and he would feel ashamed of himself, if I were to use, his words. But he said, this is too important to just quit. So he keeps at it. He writes some tally marks again. Trips up again, but then eventually gets on a streak so long that he'd start to run out of space entirely. The promises we make in life come from so many different areas, but for me, my favorite place where promise cards are written, who they're written by, it's from kids. Kids have not been disappointed by a life of broken promises. They come to moments with genuinely good intent, and maybe that's this 5th grader in Fresno, California, who writes, I will never get in jail. Right? Like, I think the sentence structure is a little off, or word choice or something, I don't know, but I hope that everyone in the chat, you could go ahead and make that promise right now. We'd be a better country for it. But another card that I would see from one of the kids that would write a promise is from this little 6-year-old and I'll decipher this for you. It says, I will keep my family safe, right? And then she draws little stick figures, and it's, adorable in its own right. But there are 2 things you need to know about this card. The first is that I took this picture, and the second is that I took this picture in a facility, a school that is only for children who have been abandoned, neglected, beaten, abused. You start to see promise cards sometimes and wonder to yourself, in this case, why does a 6-year-old feel like that has to be their responsibility? You see, teaching children reading, writing, math, science, that is all incredibly important, of course. But if we do not teach our children how to be decent human beings to one another, then you tell me what the point of society, what's the point at all? That's why, because I said I would heavily invest into character education, social and emotional learning in schools. We teach concepts like honesty, self-control, accountability in the classroom. The components, the elements that add up to a promise kept. We've done live character development programming with over 179,000 students in the last 7 years alone. And here comes a question for you. We'll just type your answer, right? Type your answer into the live chat. We'll do a poll in that way. Which one of these elements that add up to a promise kept, which one do you think the world needs the most right now? Like right now in this pandemic, what gets humanity through it? Is it compassion? Is it contemplation, really thinking things through and ahead? Accountability, a sense of personal responsibility, or self-control, sacrifice, honesty, hope? Type your answers in. I would love to hear NASA's perspective on really why promises help move the world. Along the way, I would start to understand each and every one of these elements deeper, not just through stories, but the habits and tactics that it takes to keep promises. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think that everyone, when they're trying to make a change in their life, we go on a journey that comes with some difficult decisions. And even starting Because I Said I Would itself was one of those moments for me, before all this started, I guess what I'm saying, before I ever clicked that button, before it ever went viral, I was just some dude, I was just some guy working in a software company, which is pretty stereotypical for an Asian guy, but that's all right. And yes, okay, I know karate. That's not the point of what I'm trying to say here, okay? The point is that I really liked working at the software company. I'll be a little cocky for a second, and I apologize. But I was the youngest manager in the entire place. over 1,400 employees. Fortune magazine, they got a list, top 100 companies to work for. We were on it. I made a 6-figure income, 5-figure bonuses, 5-figure stock options, everything that my father came to this land for himself, his son had. But you get a bunch of messages from those children. You read promise cards for people in poverty, people in, suffering from terminal illness. You read enough of those cards, and then you look me right in the face and try to tell me that this life is somehow just about money. Nah. Money is only a means to an end, and that end we must choose. So I thought maybe I should, quit my job, start a nonprofit, right? Terrible idea. I would learn firsthand how hard charity is. I'm laughing and crying at the same time. At the beginning, it didn't make any sense to leave my job because this is what was happening. I was making all this money from the software company, and then I was spending tens of thousands of dollars of my paychecks on stamps and envelopes. Donations weren't coming in, but I had made a commitment. And so it didn't make any sense to leave my job financially, but emotionally one day, I'd be pushed over the edge by a letter. It was dropped to my desk at work, which is strange. Now, this letter had no postmarking on it. It was anonymous. Didn't know who it came from, but it would convince me to leave my job. And I would like to read part of it to you right now. It was February of 2013. I'm sitting at my desk at work, and I read, "Hi, Alex. I've been keeping up with your blog. Because I said I would has really, really helped me through a rough patch. There have been lots of times where I didn't think life was worth living. And I almost took my life. Almost. I'm getting stronger every day, and a lot of that strength comes from a few promise cards I've written. I have lots of people who care about me. I'm a very, very lucky person. It took a lot for me to realize that I should be alive. I do have a purpose. I'm not sure if I would even be around if it wasn't for you and your organization. So thanks, Mr. Sheen. I know I'm supposed to write this on a card, but I want to promise you that I will not give up. Now, I'm not embarrassed at this moment, nor am I ever going to be, to say that I sat at my desk that day and I cried, thinking about what a promise like that would mean to my father. I looked up in this office, in this sea of people, and I wondered, who is it? Is it a friend of mine who just didn't want me to know what they were going through, and they left the name off of it? Or is this a complete stranger? 1,400 people, you can't know them all. More importantly, this letter gave me the courage to do what I knew already had to be done, and that was to leave my life of comfort, to help people in what little ways I know how. And Isabel in the chat mentions that one of her favorite parts of a promise that the world needs is sacrifice, and that's what I felt in this moment. So I asked for a meeting with my boss, just through email. She didn't know what this meeting was about, but she agreed to it. And I remember walking into her office with this letter in hand. She was sitting there at her desk, pretending to work or whatever bosses are doing in there all the time, you know what I mean? Anyways, so she's sitting there on Facebook, and I give her this letter. I say, "Hey, boss, if you could just read this, it would make it a lot easier for me to do what I got to do right now." And she says, "Sure, Alex, no problem." She unfolds this college-ruled piece of notebook paper, and she reads as much as I have literally just read to you right now. But then she stops. Like halfway through the letter, she just stops reading. She looks up at me and she says, "Alex, this letter. Alex, this letter is from my daughter." "This is her handwriting," she says. "This is about her. That envelope you're holding, those are the kind of envelopes I have on my kitchen counter. When did she give this to you?" My boss says to me. See, I didn't know this, but my boss's daughter had been suffering through depression. Something that a lot of Americans are feeling right about now. And in depression, I believe that time and support, reaching out for help, I believe there's a path to hope. I believe that. But at age 14, my boss's daughter did not yet share this thought. see, she was overweight, and she would go to school, and kids decided that they were going to pick on her for that. And so she'd come home in this feeling of rejection and sorrow. Not knowing how to handle her emotions, she would cut herself. This family, they knew about promise cards long before the world. Sometimes with our bad habits, maybe it's not promising to quit forever. Because honestly, sometimes forever, it is too far to hold. How about just right not today? Do that again tomorrow. See if we can get these cards to stack up. My boss's daughter would end this habit of self-harm and write this letter. Ask an older student to drive her to the place where I worked, where her parents worked. With this letter in hand, she would sneak into our office like some kind of childhood ninja. I imagine her in like a ninja outfit doing a bunch of cartwheels past security. She'd throw some smoke bombs, right? A couple backflips. She puts this letter in my inbox. That letter would eventually get to my desk. And that's part of the reason that I'm talking to you right now. I'm all in. And I'm here to ask you to be a part of something. In your own way, in your own life. We are a social movement, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the betterment of humanity through promises made and kept. That's how I believe this world is made better. When each and every one of us, on our shoulders and on our backs, takes the burden of a promise to improve ourselves, our families, a community, a cause, the belief in the power of a single individual, and the personal responsibility that we all hold to make this world a better place. And so I want to ask you right now, what is one humanitarian issue that you care about? Because there are a lot of different ways to express a promise for the betterment of the world. Now, NASA obviously has its own mission, but I'm asking you as a person, what is an issue, an area of challenge and need that you care about? Personally right now, I'm of course thinking about the coronavirus, and I'm thinking about COVID-19's effect on humanity and all the promises that it requires. Makes me think of one of our supporters just 3 miles down the road from here. Her name's Miranda, pictured here in her vintage bridal shop. Now, Miranda, she was seeing the same news stories about a year ago that you and I were seeing, right? This shortage of face masks. There was a call to action in our country to sew face masks. And she says to herself, well, sewing a face mask, come on, I can sew entire wedding dresses. What's a face mask to me? And so she sits at a sewing machine for 10 days, and she sews over 300 face masks for her local hospital. Because I said I would, actually ran one of the largest volunteer face mask sewing operations in the entire state of Ohio. Over 270 volunteers sewing over 20,000 face masks at the peak of shortage for hospitals. But we have been doing a number of other things to help fight this pandemic, as we all need to stay safe, stay healthy. We're sending meals to healthcare workers on the front lines in different hospitals in different states. And we've even created an unemployment transition program, a leadership workshop, a certificate granting program to teach the lessons on how to keep a promise, a resiliency series, right? So that people can sit in an interview and say, hey, look, I've been working on myself. Maybe you could give me a shot, right? But they've got to complete a capstone project in this unemployment transition program. And that capstone project is to keep a promise to help a family who has lost a loved one to COVID-19 itself. We've been paying for funeral expenses. We've been helping with memorial services in an untraditional time. This pandemic is asking all of us to change. And as Benjamin Franklin once said, you may delay, but time will not. The world is asking a lot of us. And as organizations, we have to deliver. We have to change the world for the better. Even if the journey changed. I had programs in schools and prisons. What were more affected by COVID than that, I had to find, I'm not going to sit here and just take government loans and say, well, I'll return in a year. This is not the time for that. Our country needs us in a different way. And I'm not talking even about NASA as an organization. I'm talking about each and every one of us as citizens. But listen, we could sit here and laugh and cry together, have a bunch of emotions. However, even with all that fiery language, that's not going to make promises any easier to keep. So that's why now I want to talk about some habits and tactics that help honor your word. But before I get to that, I want to make sure I'm keeping things in context. So in the live chat right now, answer this question: what is making your goals challenging? Right? Is it time management? Is it staying motivated? You know, what could that be? And maybe one of the challenges that you're facing is to one of the issues that you're even so supportive of, whether it's caring with food and housing insecurity. I'm looking at your chat right now. Maybe it's a promise that you have. Skip to helping your veterans in your area, whatever that might be. It could be a challenge to humanitarian things, could be just a personal challenge. Let's hear that as I talk about three habits and tactics to keep a commitment through crisis. The first thing I want to talk about is called the courage of no. Now, there's a lot of ways to explain this concept, but for me, my favorite way to start it off is to go back to 1951. In 1951, 7 people are placed in a room. They're told that they're going to participate in a vision test, right? All they had to do is say which one of the comparison lines, A, B, or C, is most like the target line, right? Now, these lines aren't even that close, right? You can tell that. And so everyone's like, yeah, we get it, scientist guy. It's A. Just start with the real test. And he's like, okay, that's kind of rude, but here we go. Comparison 1 goes exactly as you imagined. Everybody gets it right. Comparison 2 is thrown up there. What happens? Well, same exact thing. This is almost getting boring, right? But then something happens in comparison 3. First person gets the answer wrong. Like, it's clearly not C. And if that's not strange enough, the second person also gets it wrong. And every person after that, I mean, how could that possibly be? Well, to answer that question, we will have to pull the veil off this charade. For this is not a test about vision at all. No. This is a test. This is a test about conformity. Because the first 6 people, they are actors, paid to say the wrong answers. Researchers wanted to understand, could you get somebody to give an objectively wrong answer just by the pressure and precedent of the people before them giving wrong answers? Now, when you do a test like this, a vision test, no actors, no pressure to conform, a real vision test, you only get 2% wrong answers. That is it. You introduce those actors and that pressure to conform, wrong answers go up 30-fold. 30 times the number of wrong answers. So why am I asking, or why am I saying any of this? Well, I think when it comes to commitment, when it comes to the actions we take in this life, we often just go with what's around us. We have almost a sense of embarrassment, especially when we're asked to make a promise. We just end up saying this word. Oh yeah, Thursday, 4 o'clock? Sure, yeah. Yeah, I could be there, right? And at the root of that is people pleasing. We want to help others. We want to make people happy. We don't want to go against the grain. And that's actually positive intent, right? To make people happy. But if we're making a bunch of promises that we don't actually end up keeping, we're not doing favors for anyone. And if we're going along with those around us and the pressure and precedent before us in a dangerous way, then we are risking people's lives. We must have the courage of no in so many different ways. Easier said than done. So I have this question for you in the chat. Who is it hard to say no to in your life, right? Is it your kids? Is it family, friends? Is it work? It could be acquaintances or strangers. Who is it particularly difficult to say no to in your life? I want to give a tip for that group that you struggle with. And I have a group that I struggle with. A moment that I struggle with. This is obviously pre-pandemic, but I would give assembly speeches at schools, and kids would come up to me almost like as a souvenir. They would say, give me a promise. Like, write a promise on this thing. Promise, man, And I would have to say no to them over and over and over again, because even the smallest commitment times 200 is not something I could honor. So here is my habit and tactic. Memorize a go-to sentence. I'm not saying like the feeling or the thought or the premise of, I'm saying word for word, memorize a go-to sentence to say no, to get over that embarrassment. Mine sounds like this. Hey, Cassie, listen, I respect you too much to make a promise I can't keep. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to pass. you know? And so there's many different ways, but I'm saying memorize it, because if you don't, yes just slips out. Going with the flow just slips out. It's easier to do that. Tell yourself, well, I'll just correct it later. It's better to stand firm now. That's the first way to keep a promise. The second is 100% calendaring, right? Now, 100% calendaring to keep a commitment is calendaring everything in your day. I'm talking time to get ready, eat, sleep, even free time. And if you were to see that, you might be like, oof, Alex, that's like a little, like, calm down. That's making me stress out just looking at that. But research actually shows that these type of strategies could actually reduce stress, not increase it. In a study published by the American Psychological Association, the best way to manage stress proved to be time management. It proved to be better than setting goals. It was better than listening to music or making lists. Time management created less job tension, increased overall GPAs, and increased an overall satisfaction with life. And I would see that play out in my universe of commitments personally, right? You know, I've made a promise to volunteer to walk across the entire state of Ohio in 10 days to raise money for the victims of sexual violence. I have volunteered at 52 different nonprofits in a single year. I travel 300 days a year just to give speeches. So you can imagine all the stress that would pile on top of you in all these promises, especially in such a public light. So I'd be sitting in the car going somewhere, and I think to myself, ugh, I'm supposed to email that other charity, and I'd stress out about it. But what I do is I take that stress and I put it on my calendar. And then inevitably it would come up again. I would think about it again, like, oh, I'm supposed to do that. But then I say, wait a second, Alex, you literally scheduled a time to worry about that, right? What I'm doing there is I am taking that stress and I'm giving it a place to die. It's almost putting an order to your worry in life. I deeply believe that time management, it is stress management, because when you have a plan ahead of you, you feel some hope, you feel feasibility, and that reduces your stress. So let me ask you this question. What is getting pushed off your calendar right now, right? What is it exercise? Is it sleep? Is it time to get ready? Is it, I don't know, you're taking care of your kids in a time where homeschooling has challenged us so much, right? We even see answers from the previous question about things that challenge us, right? Like self-sabotage, self-doubt, but maybe part of it is also time management. So I'd love to hear your answer to this question as I challenge you to a 3-day challenge. I know 100% calendaring is a little extreme, so let's not do it forever. How about you just give me 3 days? Calendar, sleep time to get ready, free time, everything. Calendar what no one else would. See if it helps you spot problems before they happen, right? Now, the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to keeping a commitment through crisis is called a code of honor. I'm going to use a fictitious scenario, so just stick with me, right? It'll eventually come around. All right, so you're walking in the woods, right, by yourself, safe in a pandemic, and you hear this, like, buzzing sound, like over in the bushes. You're not quite sure what it is. So you walk over there and you push away the branches and the leaves, and then you see a large metal pod. Now there seems to be some kind of engraving on this vessel, and so you wipe away the branches, and this is what it says. People often see how the past might have been better. You might have acted differently, said something different, and subsequent events might have unfolded in a different way. Have you ever had one of these thoughts about what might have been that was especially vivid, compelling, or obvious to you? Something you couldn't help but think about repeatedly? Now that courses through your mind, this idea, but then it is the next set of words that truly grabs you. This machine can take you back to that moment. Before you can really process it all, the pod opens up. You decide, you know what? I'm getting in. You think back to that moment that you regret, the one you wish you could take back, that single do-over, and you push. Don't type it out. Just think it to yourself. Where does this pod take you? What is it that you regret? Now, this is obviously a fictitious scenario, right? I'm just trying not to be boring, guys, right? But what is real about this is that I took those words on that vessel from a 2005 study from the University of Illinois, a survey about regret. Now, it's really not the results of that survey that are most interesting to me. It was just the question itself, because that question of what we regretted the most that we wish we could do over made me think about how we arrived to that regret. And of course, your decision-making process has to be a part of that, right? We failed in the decision-making process. Now, if I were to ask somebody at NASA or my 7th grade science teacher, or even probably like 4th grade, and I said, hey, you're coming to a problem. How do you solve that problem? What would be an approach, right? My 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Main, she would say, Alex, it's simple. You learned it. I taught it to you. It's called the scientific method, right? You go through these steps, right? You come out on the other side with a better answer. But now I ask myself this question about every other challenge in life in making a decision. What is the filter there? What do we use? Maybe even what do you use? What is a question you ask yourself when making a tough decision? Type that in the chat. But for me, that's what a code of honor is. This is a standard set of procedures in how I live my life. When I come to a difficult moment, I say to myself, Alex, are you holding yourself accountable? Alex, are you being honest in this moment? I run myself through a filter. I come out on the other side with a better decision. And so that's what I'm challenging you to do. You know, if you don't have this memorized, your top 3 values and how you filter your decisions, then that's what I'm asking you to do right now, and maybe you could post that to social media. Maybe you could write something like, I'm trying to stay committed to what I believe in, so I picked my 3 values to help guide my life, and whatever those are for you, you write that out. That's not for us to decide. But use this as a compass as you navigate the difficult times as this pandemic hopefully comes to an end soon. So these are some habits and tactics that I've picked up from our supporters around the way. You've got to have the courage of no to stay prioritized on the promises that you've actually already made that you need to keep, right? You've got to calendar 100% or a lot more than most people are to relieve your stress, spot problems before they happen. And then a code of honor. Make sure that we're navigating this life in a way that when it all ends, we have a sense of self-respect and we tried our best. My name is Alex Sheen, and I'm the founder of Because I Said I Would. To me, it is an honor to share with you this card, how it was born in my life, what it means to me, what it means to others, and most of all, maybe what we do and how to keep a promise. But most of the time, I don't get this kind of chance. As fast as a message like ours has spread, most of the time, people just hear about things like this on the news, right? You know, the Today Show jams a camera in my face and says, Alex, you got 30 seconds. Try to explain it all. What it comes across as in these features is like this guy, Alex Sheen, he makes promises or something, and I don't know, he wears the same shirt every day for some reason. You know, people just change the channel. They think it's about me. Well, if it was about me, I would take the $1 million that I make in a year just giving speeches, and I'd stay home a wealthy man. But instead, 100% of that money goes to the charity. I make as much as a kindergarten teacher. This is not a show to me. Because I Said It Would is not only not about me, I will also go so far as to say that it isn't even about my own father. If you still, it doesn't mean I don't miss him, okay? Like, if you still have yours, you go home, you hug him extra tight for me. I miss my dad every single day. But even in that pain and the emotion, I assure you this is not about me. This is not about him. This has always been, hear me clearly, always been, and forever will be, it is about you. Because my dad, Al Sheen, he is gone forever. I have come to accept that. But you and I, we are still here. And we may not all have achieved the highest levels of education or the greatest of families. We may not all come from wealthy resources, but you and I, we were all born with the ability to take one step at a time, to become a stronger version of ourselves. It is an absolute honor to speak to an organization like NASA at a time like this, when our future, it's so exciting that the purpose in fighting for that future is so real. But in all these promise cards I've seen, we can't look so far into the future to forget about our health and safety right now, because that's what gets us to that end point. And so I will leave you with a final quote as you continue your mission to serve the world and future generations. The quote is from Mark Twain. Mark Twain once said, "The two most important days in your life, the two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why." I hope you keep fighting for that second day to find that reason. And if you already have it, stay committed. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Alex, for sharing with us the story of Because I Said I Would and the importance of a promise. I know personally, I feel this is a message and challenge that we can all take on and apply in our daily lives. I was taking notes throughout your speech, and I know I took a lot out of this, and I'm going to make every attempt to apply these concepts to what I do. So thank you so much for that.
You better, Dustin, because you're the only one I could physically see during the whole speech. So I'm really just talking to you. You know what I'm saying?
Perfect. Yeah, this is counseling for me right now. I love it. Personal counseling.
A very intense one-on-one session.
Absolutely. So with that said, we did go a little over on time. We only have a few more minutes. I do want to get to some of these questions because there are some good questions in here. So for those out there in the audience who can stay on with us, please do. Thank you for staying on. Those who can't, totally understand. Time is important, and I want to respect that. But we will stay on just a few more minutes to get through some of these questions, and then a few more slides at the very end. So a question that we have right now. This was a good one, and it's one that I was going to ask you. Matthew from YouTube said, "Have you ever missed a promise? And if so, how did you make up for it? What did you do?"
Absolutely, Dustin and Matthew. I would say the only way to keep all your promises is to not make any, right? But that's a coward's life. We have to put ourselves out there to order the future and to reach our goals, help others in need, et cetera, et cetera. So it's inevitable that something is going to change, right? The weather or traffic or a learning curve that took longer than you thought it was going to. We've got to make sure that we know the life skills of how to apologize. I mean, Matthew, when's the last time someone looked you in the eye and said, "Hey, I broke a promise to you. I was supposed to be here. I'm not here to waste your time, and I apologize." And then stop talking, right? No excuses, no, look at all these reasons why. It turns out that that's when we respect people the most, when they give us an authentic apology, right? And I think we need to get real good at that. I think too many people apologize through texts and emails, right? And we can build stronger relationships in these challenging moments, in these broken promise moments. We can build better relationships with a good, authentic apology. And I can't explain how meaningful that is, even though it is very simple. And I do see a question here that I'd love to answer about calendaring conflicts, right? Do you always, if you have two things that accidentally calendared over, does the first thing always take priority? Honestly, not always. I don't really do a first in, first out method. I go back to the code of honor, and I say, okay, which one meets the test more? What is better for the world? And one thing that I have to ask myself in that moment is about that sacrifice in my list of 7, right? Because what I often will react to, because I'm a human being, is like, what's easiest for me or what's better for me? And that question of, Alex, are you making a reasonable sacrifice here? It really helps me gear towards which one of those two that I should really be selecting. So thank you so much for that question. All
Excellent.
right.
We're going to take one more question here.
Sure.
So how do you get someone else who has broken a promise to kind of see the impact of them breaking that promise? How do you convey that?
Yeah, this is a difficult one that unfortunately it takes a lot of hard work, right? Speakers like myself, we're all looking to deliver you some kind of silver bullet, But this is a lot of human behavioral change that's going to take some time. But I will go back to a scientist, one of the most famous to ever live, maybe ever will live, right? Albert Einstein once said, leading by example. Leading by example is not the primary way of influencing others. It is the only way. Right? And so when you're trying to lead someone through that leadership journey of recognizing the challenges and shortfalls that they've gone through, take an audit of how you're apologizing. Take those learning moments on as not when they fail, but when you fail, right? And how are you kind of leading by example, and then try to draw a connection between the two, your behavior on what you're modeling, and try to draw a line to say, well, in these scenarios, I think that's how we should approach moments of failure, right? It's part of life. We're human beings. Fallibility all over the place. It is what it is. But we need to be able to recognize that in a reasonable way and course correct. And so using your own examples is better than using theirs in the beginning. Obviously, eventually you've got to come to address their problems. But that's a great question. Thank you, Dustin.
You are most welcome. So we're going to go ahead and start to close this up. And I'm going to show one slide here and ask Laren to come online and explain this amazing little contest that we have going. Laren?
Hi, everyone. Oh, sorry. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Alex, for that wonderful presentation. The NASA Exchange has provided a drawing for us for all those who participated in today's presentation. So to enter, you're going to email the keyword promise to the email you see there on the screen, ksc-ilofsafety@mail.nasa.gov, to be entered to win the discount code provided by the NASA Exchange. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. So I'm going to go ahead and close up the show. Alex, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share?
I just appreciate the honor of speaking to NASA. As I mentioned, maybe even the chat, my assistant worked at NASA for a long time booking your speakers internally, and she speaks only highly of this prestigious organization. My father, was a scientist and a mathematician in so many ways, and if he were to be alive today, I think he would have been proud of just the fact that I even have this privilege. So you keep fighting the good fight for this world, our future, and our country, and thank you again.
Again, thank you, Mr. Sheen, for your time. Thanks, everyone, for attending today's presentation. Tomorrow we have one more presentation this week, Dr. Pamela Mulcahy, who will discuss how science and storytelling can help keep us safer. So please join us tomorrow for our next edition of Safety and Health Days. Again, thanks everyone for joining us, and hope to see you virtually at our next event. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.